King Sadiq sat in the highest room of his grand palace. From his seat, he could see the whole kingdom. His palace was enormous, with high, thick walls made from cold stone. There were beautiful gold doors and windows with stained glass. The floor was covered in fine rugs, and the ceiling was painted with bright colors. Everything in the palace was perfect, but King Sadiq felt a deep emptiness in his heart. Every day, he would sit alone, staring out the window. He could see the people of his kingdom moving below, working, laughing, and living their lives. But he was far away from them, separated by distance, power, and loneliness. The king had no family. He had no wife, no children, and no friends. His days were spent in silence, except for the sound of his servants moving around. King Sadiq thought to himself, "Why do I rule a kingdom if I have no one to share it with? Why does it feel like I am the loneliest person in the world?" He had spent many years like this, thinking that if he worked hard enough, his kingdom would flourish. But despite his success, he felt disconnected from the people. He never had anyone to talk to. The walls of his palace seemed to grow taller each day, making him feel even more isolated. Far away from the palace, in a quiet village, there lived a young shepherd named Sammy. Sammy was a simple boy. He did not have a large house or many things, but he had something much more important: the love and respect of everyone in his village. Every morning, he would take his sheep out to graze. He cared for them as if they were his family, guiding them through the fields and hills. Sammy was known as the brave shepherd because he was always ready to help those in need. The villagers loved Sammy because he was kind and fair. He never refused anyone who needed help, whether it was helping carry heavy bags or comforting someone who was sad. He would always take time to listen to others, showing them that he cared. His honesty and bravery made him stand out, even though he did not ask for attention. People often said that Sammy had the heart of a leader. Sammy was content with his life. He had no dreams of power or wealth, but he hoped to make the world better by showing kindness. He did not have a family of his own, but he was never lonely. The villagers treated him like family, and he enjoyed his peaceful life. One thing Sammy loved was the beauty of nature. Every day, he would sit under a tree after taking care of his sheep, playing his flute. The sound of the music would echo across the hills, soothing the animals and the people who walked by. King Sadiq had grown tired of his empty palace. He wanted to understand his people better. So, one day, without telling anyone, he decided to leave the palace and go on a journey. He wore simple clothes to hide his identity. He wanted to see his kingdom through the eyes of his people. The king traveled for days, walking over hills, crossing rivers, and passing through villages. His journey was long and difficult, but he didn't mind. He wanted to feel the land beneath his feet and see the world beyond his palace. On the 5th day of his travels, King Sadiq reached a small village. He was tired, hungry, and thirsty from his journey. He had heard the sound of music in the air and followed it to find a young man sitting under a tree. The boy was playing a flute for his sheep. King Sadiq walked over to him. "Excuse me," he said, his voice soft from travel. "Could you spare some water for a tired traveler?" The shepherd looked up and smiled warmly. "Of course," he said. "You look like you've been walking for a long time." The shepherd handed the king a jug of water, and the king drank deeply. "Thank you," said King Sadiq, wiping his mouth. "My name is not important. I am just a traveler. What is your name, young man?" "I am Sammy," said the shepherd. "I live in this village. Are you from around here?" The king shook his head. "I am from far away," he said, "but I have been walking for many days." Sammy offered the king some bread and fruit, and they sat under the tree together. As they ate, the king listened to Sammy's stories about the village. Sammy told him about his life, his work as a shepherd, and how the people in the village helped each other. Sammy was a good listener, and he spoke with honesty and warmth. He didn't know that the man he was talking to was the king of the land. Sadiq was impressed by the boy's kindness and wisdom. "You have a good heart, Sammy," said the king. "You are brave and honest. It is not often that I meet someone like you." Sammy smiled. "Thank you, but I'm just a simple shepherd." The king looked at Sammy and thought, "This young man has the qualities of a great leader. He cares for others and is not afraid to do what is right. I wonder if he could help me." A few days later, King Sadiq visited the village again. This time, he revealed his true identity to Sammy. "Sammy," he said, "I am King Sadiq. I have traveled to see my kingdom, and I've seen many things. But there is something about you that I cannot ignore. You are wise, brave, and kind. I would like to invite you to my palace to help me rule." Sammy was stunned. He had been speaking to the king without even knowing it. "But your majesty," he said, "I am just a shepherd. I do not belong in a palace." King Sadiq smiled. "You may not believe it, but I think you could help me lead this kingdom better than anyone else. Please come to the palace. I want to hear your ideas." Sammy hesitated, but agreed. He was curious to see the palace and what it would be like to live in such a place. He had never imagined that his simple life as a shepherd would lead to something so grand. When Sammy arrived at the palace, he was amazed. The walls were covered in gold, and there were beautiful paintings everywhere. The floors were made of polished marble, and the ceilings were high, with chandeliers hanging from above. Sammy felt out of place in the grand palace. It was so different from the simple village life he had known. But the people in the palace were kind to him. They saw how humble and genuine he was, and soon Sammy made friends with the servants, cooks, and even the soldiers. He quickly gained the respect of everyone. He never treated anyone as less important, no matter their role in the palace. As the days went by, King Sadiq and Sami spent more time together. The king listened to Sami's ideas on how to make the kingdom a better place. Sami's wisdom and calmness began to change the way the king thought. He started to care more about his people. The people of the kingdom, who had once seen their king as distant and unapproachable, began to notice a change in him. They saw that he was becoming more compassionate and fair. Over time, King Sadiq grew older. He knew that his time on the throne was limited. He wanted someone who could lead the kingdom with kindness and wisdom, just as Sami had helped him do. One evening, the king called Sami to his chambers. "Sami," the king said, "I have thought long and hard about who should succeed me when I am gone. I want you to be the next king. You have the heart of a true leader, and I know you will care for the people of this kingdom just as I have." Sami was shocked. "But I am not fit to be a king, Your Majesty. I am just a shepherd. I do not have the skills to rule." The king placed a hand on his shoulder. "You may not think you are ready, but you are. You understand the people. You have been their friend and their helper. You know what is important. I trust you to lead this kingdom after I am gone." Sami looked into the king's eyes. He could see the trust and love in the king's face. With a deep breath, he finally said, "I will do my best, Your Majesty." The villagers were overjoyed when they heard the news. They knew that Sami would be a fair and wise king. When the time came, Sami took the throne. Under his rule, the kingdom flourished. The people were happy, and they felt cared for. King Sadiq passed away peacefully, knowing that his kingdom was in good hands. Sami ruled with the same kindness and bravery that had always defined him, and the kingdom lived in peace for many years. When Sami became king, life in the kingdom began to change. The people saw a new leader, someone they could trust. Sami ruled with kindness and wisdom. He spent every day walking through the villages, talking to people, and listening to their concerns. He wanted to understand their problems and help them however he could. One day, a group of farmers came to the palace. Their faces were full of worry. They explained that there had been little rain that year, and their crops were suffering. The king listened carefully, his eyes filled with concern. "Your crops are the heart of our kingdom," Sami said. "Without them, there will be hunger. We must find a way to help." farmers suggested building canals to bring water from the nearby river. But the work would be hard, and the people didn't have enough resources. Sammy knew this would be a tough decision. He gathered his advisors and listened to their ideas. One of his advisors, a man named Kadir, suggested that the king could send soldiers to help dig the canals. But Sammy thought about it for a moment. He wanted to do more than just order people around. He wanted to show the people he cared. Sammy stood up, his eyes full of determination. "I will not only send workers. I will lead them myself," he said. "Together, we will dig the canals. I will work beside you, side by side, as one of the people." The farmers and villagers were amazed. They had never seen a king who would get his hands dirty to help them. Sammy worked long days alongside them. He picked up a shovel, dug in the hot sun, and carried heavy stones. As he worked, the people began to see him not just as their king, but as their friend. They admired his willingness to work hard for them, and it made them feel more connected to their leader. As the canals began to take shape, the rain finally came. It was not much, but it was enough to help the crops grow. The farmers were overjoyed, and they knew that they had a king who cared for them. After the success of the canal project, Sammy believed that his kingdom was growing stronger. But a new challenge soon arose. Some of the neighboring kingdoms began to grow jealous of the prosperity Sammy's kingdom was enjoying. They worried that his kingdom was becoming too powerful. One evening, a messenger arrived at the palace with troubling news. A neighboring king named Faran had sent soldiers to the border. They had crossed into Sammy's land and were threatening to take over the fertile land near the river. Sammy sat in the royal hall, thinking about what to do. He could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He didn't want to start a war, but he couldn't let his people suffer either. He called his advisors to the palace to discuss the matter. "King Faran's army is strong," Kadir warned. "If we don't act quickly, we could lose everything we've worked for." Sammy stood up and walked to the window. He could see the hills and fields that his people had worked so hard to cultivate. He thought of the farmers who had labored in the sun to grow their crops, and the workers who had helped build the canals. "Peace must always come first," Sammy said, turning to face his advisors. "We will send a messenger to King Faran. I will speak with him and try to find a peaceful solution." His advisors were worried. "But what if he refuses?" one of them asked. "What if he insists on war?" Sammy nodded. "If he refuses, we will protect our land. But I will do everything I can to avoid bloodshed. I will go myself to speak with him." The next day, Sammy rode out with a small group of trusted soldiers. They traveled for days, crossing forests and hills, until they reached King Farin's kingdom. Sammy knew that this was a dangerous journey, but he believed that speaking with Farhan in person would be the best way to avoid conflict. When they arrived at King Farhan's palace, the guards were hesitant to let them in. But Sammy spoke kindly to them, explaining that he was there to discuss peace. The guards finally agreed, and Sammy was led to the royal chambers. King Farhan was a tall man with a sharp face and a proud air. He looked at Sammy with suspicion, but also with curiosity. "King Sammy, what brings you to my kingdom?" Farhan asked. Sammy bowed his head respectfully. "I have come to speak of peace," he said. "I know you are concerned about my kingdom's growth, but I do not wish for war. Our people are not enemies. We both want what is best for our lands." King Farhan looked at him closely, considering his words. "You are bold to come here alone," he said, "but I will hear you." Sammy explained how the two kingdoms could share resources, trade, and support each other. He spoke of building a strong bond between their people, one based on respect and understanding. Farhan listened carefully, and after a long silence, he spoke. "You are unlike any king I have ever met, Sammy. You speak of peace, but your words are not weak. They are strong. I will consider your offer. I will not fight you." Sammy breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you, King Farhan," he said. "Together, we can build a future of peace." The two kings agreed to sign a treaty that would prevent war and open new trade routes between their kingdoms. Sammy returned to his people as a hero, knowing that he had avoided conflict and brought peace to his land. When Sammy returned to his kingdom, the people greeted him with cheers. They were proud of their king for bringing peace without resorting to violence. Sammy felt a deep sense of pride, but he also knew that leadership was not about winning battles. It was about bringing people together. The farmers, the workers, and the villagers celebrated the peace treaty. They gathered in the town square, where Sammy spoke to them. "This kingdom belongs to all of you," Sammy said. "We are a family, and we must care for each other. Together, we will continue to grow stronger, not through war, but through kindness, hard work, and respect for one another." The people cheered, and Sammy felt his heart swell with pride. He knew that he had made the right choice, not just for his kingdom, but for the future of his people. That night, as the stars twinkled above, Sammy sat alone on the palace balcony. He thought of the journey he had been on, from the lonely king in the grand palace to the shepherd who had become a king who cared deeply for his people. Sammy smiled to himself, knowing that he had found his place in the world. Under Sami's rule, the kingdom thrived. The people grew stronger. The fields were full of crops, and the canals brought water to every corner of the land. The trade with King Farin's kingdom flourished, and Sami's reputation as a wise and compassionate ruler spread far and wide. Sami never forgot where he came from. He would often return to the village where he had grown up, walking among the people, listening to their stories, and offering a helping hand. He ruled not from his palace, but from the hearts of his people. Years passed, and the kingdom flourished in peace. Sami grew older, but his heart remained the same. He had ruled with kindness and wisdom, and the people loved him for it.